You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So today I'm going to sit down and do a solo podcast all about summertime fishing. So, here in Montana, we're definitely into summertime. It's going to be a strange year this year, at least where I'm at in southwest Montana. We just don't have the snowpack and didn't get much moisture here in the spring, and so they've been running like absolute bare minimums in these rivers. So they've been running a little bit higher, due to runoff and the snow melt and things of that nature, but they're running minimum flows out of the dams and minimum flows all summer long. I actually heard about some midnight fishing rules, or I can't remember what they call that, but basically they don't let you fish in the middle of the day due to the water temp and the stress that it puts on the fish, that if you catch them, you can kill them. So it's going to be a strange year this year out west, but it's still summertime. There's some great fishing to be had. I just had one of the best spring seasons I've ever had. It was absolutely amazing. I fished 6-7 different systems, something like that. Got the Squala Hatch on the west side of the state. Able to get some Salmon Fly Hatch here lately, and then, some great streamer action, some great nymphing days, and then also caught some good dry fly hatches early in the season, right away in the spring. Caught this Caddis Hatch on this system I fish, and man, it was incredible. So this system, I went to it last year, and I just had my streamer rod, and I probably told you guys this story, or you've heard it already, but so I went to this system, and I had my streamer rod, and then it's a bank fishing river, so you got to walk way down it. So I know these holes, I fished it for years, that I can go down, throw streamers in, and usually chase up some pretty nice browns. But the water temperature's kind of got to be right there for streamers. So anyways, last year I went down there with my streamer rod. I was walking back up, and it's like these fish really key into these first dry fly hatches of the year, and they're really hungry. And so as I was walking up, I got this big slow stretch, and these fish were just going off, and they were eating these betas. They're like size 18 betas or so. And all I had was my streamer rod with a weighted line, so I didn't even have my dry fly rod. Now I carry my dry fly reel with me, so just in case I get in a good hatch, I can put that on, but I didn't have one. So I told you guys this story, but I stood up on this rock and I just watched these fish eat, and it's all these 18 to 24 inch browns, just these beautiful brown trout, and they're just eating dry flies all around me. They're just popping at the surface, and so finally I couldn't take it anymore, and I threw my streamer out there. I caught one, but I kind of stopped the hatch by throwing in there, and but I remember that. And I just kicked myself for not having my dry fly rod, and I actually should have gone down there again and tried to time that hatch, but this year I was ready for it. So right around the same time of the year, I was fishing this system, had my dry fly rod with me day in, day out, and I finally started to catch this hatch. And so I probably got it, I want to say I got like 4 or 5 really good days where I found those 18 to 24 inch trout, and they were all feeding on these dry flies, coming up and eating them, and just the prettiest brown trout. And I had to go like a longer leader so my fly line wouldn't hit. It's like pretty still water this time of year, like early in the spring before runoff starts. So I had to way lengthen out my leader, and then man, I like to fish like really heavy lines to these fish. So usually I'm only going down to 2x, 3x. So that's like 10-pound, 8-pound test to catch these fish. And usually, they're not too line sensitive in my areas in southwest Montana. There's a lot of ripple to the water, some color in the water, and usually it doesn't bother them. But this system for those dry flies, they were pretty particular. So I was able to tie on, I think I went all the way down to 5X, which is like unheard of for me, but 5X longer leader. And a lot of this fishing is just adapting to the conditions which you're given. If those fish won't eat it, but they're still eating dry flies, it's like figuring out what the problem is. So I was fishing like probably a 9 or 10 foot leader, may even gone a touch longer, like a 12-foot leader, all the way down to 5X, and then fishing this size 18 Baetis. And I found some really good patterns that I like. So Baetis, some of them would come off like a little bit darker, but they're kind of like a pale green color. They're a mayfly. They've got those white tails that come out from them. And so I set up on this system in these runs and started feeding these fish, and they won't take any drag. So anytime the water drags your line, your drift is over. And so it's really technical of getting the right drifts and getting this thing to free drift, because anytime you try to mend on a small dry fly, it'll pretty much sink it. So I would catch them both, quartering upstream, where I throw upstream. That's a great drift to them, where you can throw like at a 45 upstream and then get it to float down and then set the hook on them. That was working good. And then I would also use like a 45 downstream, where I'd set the fly in front of them, let it come down to them, and then set the hook that way. But it was just epic. Like I got 5-6 trips and probably caught like 8 to a dozen fish each time that were just like super solid browns. And I was so used to like playing these fish on heavier tests that the first one I hooked that was a real good one, I fought him for a while, but I was really giving him some pressure, and I ended up snapping him off, like right trying to get him to the net, because it's so tough to land these feisty fish, and especially on that 5X. I'm not used to that. I'm used to having like speedometer cable to them, where I can really pull on them. But had to use that 5X, so I had to fight these fish a little bit more gentle. I could still give them some good pressure, but man, I just had some epic days down there. And then as soon as it was here, it was gone, and the hatches would still keep coming off, but they just weren't keyed into them the same. It was like they were really hungry at the beginning time of those hatches, and then there started to be more food sources in the river, I think, where they didn't have to be keyed in on those dry flies as hard, and still got some eats, but, I'd have to strike out to go down there. And these hatches, they were mostly like overcast days, 50, 60 degrees, and like the afternoons would be really good. But it would be hit or miss for sure. And the funny thing is there's guys that fish this system, but nobody was keyed into these dry fly hatches. Like people would come down throwing nymphs, and it's like you got a wade fish, so you'd see people that would walk down the far bank or my bank, and sometimes they'd spook the fish a little bit, and fish would see them and they'd have to reset, but nobody fishing these dry flies. I had it absolutely all to myself and just had some of the prettiest eats, like this still water, and to watch like a 24-inch or 23-inch brown trout just come up slow and just barely stick his nose above the water and sip this dry fly, and then really wait for him to go down, and then set, and then he's there, and these things would just freak out. They'd run to the top of the hole, to the bottom of the hole, and there's big boulders in there that I'm trying not to have them cut my line on, and man, I just caught some awesome fish, and I caught them all the way down that system. There was a handful of good holes. There was this one run, the one that I found last year, that was always stacked with good dry fly eaters, but I also found some down below that as well, and just super springtime fishing. It was just absolutely unbelievable. So really happy I caught that, and so I'll have that in my season dates every year and fish that. And then had some great trips with Dylan. Man, we had the springtime streamer trip, and we did a podcast on that nymph trip on the Madison, and then continued to catch them on the Madison on streamers, and just had some great trips. And then able to get them really good. Like I did one more trip with Dylan. I got to get him on the podcast again. But as I've gotten into my summertime fishing now, man, I've just been so swamped with everything going on. Seems like my summers are so busy. So I got all these days and on all these different systems in the springtime, and really able to chase some great browns and dry fly hatches and streamer fishing. It's just amazing. But as I get into summertime, we're just really busy. Got a lot of guys and families counting on me, to make sure I keep these jobs running smoothly. And so yeah, just got a nose to the grindstone, and been working away on these. But I've still got time in the evenings to get out for some of these hatches. So I got to be better at getting out. I'm just wrapping up Had a couple of 4-day summits. I've wanted to do more and more public speaking and getting the chance this summer. I've got some good gigs booked, and so we do these 4-day Western hunting summits take place up in the crazy mountains. I do them with my buddy Ryan Lampers, who's a heck of a backcountry hunter. He doesn't do much fishing anymore unless he's with his girls, but man, that guy's got some fishing stories. I'd love to get him on the podcast. He guided up in Alaska for years and then telling me stories about guiding over in Russia, like back in the day when they first got over there. Just some amazing stories at catching these giant fish and some of the places that he's fished, and then grew up like in the Pacific Northwest. But anyways, a super solid guy, puts on these Western hunting summits. So these are 4-day events. So that really cut into the Salmon Fly Hatch this year. I swear, I think next year I'm just going to book myself and try to do, I don't know how many days, but maybe 20 days fishing the Salmon Fly Hatch and travel to these different systems that I just absolutely love, like get it on the Henry's Fork, or would even be cool to like get it on the Deschutes first, and then the Henry's Fork, and then over to the Big Hole, and then the Madison, and then the Yellowstone, and travel all around, because that hatch is just some of the funnest fly fishing that I've ever done. I just love it as like that higher water pushes those fish towards the edges, and those fish start to hunt for these big salmon flies, the 3-inch dry flies, and they're really tucked in and under the brush. They're sitting in cut banks, and then the eats are just so pretty on this giant salmon fly when you see the one come up and eat them. It's just it's a pretty special thing, and it's really tough to time. Like I can strike out multiple days. In fact, so I got my best day was on the Big Hole. I'd gone the weekend before, which are usually pretty good dates for me, and fished it really hard, and we'd get a few eats in the morning, barely saw any bugs. It just wasn't going off yet. But that's part of the game, is making the run over there and staying and heat checking spots, and you're just trying to time it up right and trying to catch them. But I did go the next weekend. So good buddy Dylan Ness, guy's always game for an adventure, whether we're bow hunting or whether we're fishing. And so we started talking, and I said, yeah, man, it's going to be on. I saw a couple shucks, like I was early on it, like this next weekend it's going to be on, And so Saturday morning he left his house in Billings at 2:30 in the morning to meet me here at 6 or whatever so we could leave. And I would have even left a little bit earlier, but I felt bad making him leave that early. But I wanted to get a good morning start, and we did one of my favorite sections. Stopped and looked for shucks. Like anytime you're fishing this hatch, you're trying to figure out where the hatch is. So a salmon fly hatch is a 4-year cycle. So basically, these salmon flies are flying upriver. They mate, they deposit their eggs in the river. The eggs go to the bottom of the river. These bugs hatch, and they live in the river for 4 years. And then when the water temperature gets right, it's usually like after runoff on the drop of the water. So the water starts to drop, it starts to clear. And this keys these salmon flies to crawl up on rocks and sticks and logs, and then they hatch out of this shuck, and then they fly upriver, mate, and deposit their eggs, and redoes the cycle. And high water is really good for these bugs. So this was a lower water year, but it's still high water this time of year with snow melt and things coming off. There's more flow in the rivers. But anyways, with this hatch, it's really sensitive to water temperature. And so like on the Madison here, it starts on the lower Madison, and then the hatch just works its way upriver when these bugs are hatching. So one day the hatch may be at one day the hatch may be at Town Bridge. A couple days later, it may be at 8 Mile. A couple days later, it might be at Varney Bridge. And then once it gets above Varney and into that McAtee and Palisades and Lions Bridge in that country, they start hatching a little quicker. All that water kind of warms up at the same time. And I believe it's still going on, so I need to get some evenings and go up country. Like I've spent every year of my life chasing this hatch. This is actually as busy as I've been in a long time. Fewer salmon fly days than years past, but I still got a chance. Just like Dumb and Dumber, you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, there's still a chance. And every year I kind of catch this hatch in different sections. So sometimes I just kill them from Barney to town or from 8 Mile to town. And it's all about timing it up right. Where the bugs are flying. Also, the fish need to be keyed into them. The fish can't be gorged. There's like all these factors that come into play in trying to catch these fish off the Salmon Fly Hatch. But when you hit it right, it's absolute magic on the river. It's the craziest fishing I've ever seen. And so, some days, some years it's 5 days to see an epic day, and then I'll see a couple in a row, or some years it's even 10 days to see an epic day, or sometimes I just time it right. I'm on the right section and sure see some mediocre days, but for the most part, just get them. But it's different every year. So struck out on the Big Hole, and the Big Hole is one of my favorite rivers to fish. I mean, it's even more technical than the Madison. There's just all this overhanging willows and brush down in there. And it just takes the ultimate skill. The river's going really quick, so the oarsman's working really hard to put his fishermen in the right spots. And then super technical as you're side-arming drifts and you're trying to throw your mend into your drift, getting mends on your bug, fishing it down seams. And it wants to be, these fish, like I say, they move to these edges and really key into these bugs. And so a lot of times we're catching these fish inches from the bank, like right off the cut bank. And these brown trout, they're ambush predators. Like, they like to sit in a spot and look for food that comes down. And so they'll sit under these cut banks or into these bank lines on this grass edge, and that's where the most bugs are. And so that's where you got to get your drift. And it's also a bit of playing fishermen in the modern day and age. Like, especially salmon flies are so popular, you're not the only boat on the river ever. There's a bunch of them. But there's plenty of fish for everyone. But I just feel like you show up with really good fishing skill, and you can get that bug and get those drifts where other people can't, that just catches fish. And so that's our game, as we try to row really hard, fish really hard, and get our drifts up underneath that willow brush and underneath the sticks, and just floating down just inches from the bank line, where other guys can't get it, or maybe out in the heavier water. And they will eat in the heavier water too. But that's where we seem to get our best action. And especially like early on the hatch, the fish that are keyed into them are sitting those bank lines, and the other fish don't really know what's going on yet, or they're not as keyed in. So I had Dylan leave at 2:30 in the morning. He met me, and we went over, did one of my favorite sections of the Big Hole. I had to get back for my nephew's birthday party that night, and watch some UFC fights and get together, go over with my wife and my girls over there. So they were looking forward to that. But I bit off a lot of river that day. In fact, we had to forward or out of the bottom end of it just because I had done so much water or whatever. But I just wanted to get it. Like, I wanted to get it one good day. And, I'm not quite sure where the hatch is, but we hit it perfect. Like, man, did we get some eats? We probably got 60 eats or so. Caught a bunch of good fish, and then, we each caught a handful of, like, really solid ones, too. Dylan got one that had to stretch the tape at 23, 24. I think my biggest was 22. And my 22 had one eye. and he missed my bug the first chance, but it was just, like, the coolest eat. Like, just inches off the grass line, and he exploded on it but missed my bug, and I didn't set the hook. I just let it drift, and then he turned around and then got it coming downstream and got a good eat and then good hook set on him. And then it's these big fish, when you get them out of a boat, is just a rodeo. Like, decent fish is not a big deal. You just row down, you net it yourself. But when you get a good one on that you really want to see, like Dylan's big fish, or like a few of them that we landed, it's just a rodeo. And these fish are so full of it, running, and they're down by the oar blades, and you're swinging your rod, and all of a sudden they're under the boat, and you're swinging your rod around, and you're trying to keep tight on them. They're out of the water. You're trying to keep them out of the sticks. You may hook them like back in those sticks. Have to give them just a ton of pressure to get them out. And we'll fish 0x on these bugs. So we'll fish 15-pound test, and it's still a rodeo. but it's so fun. And then the oarsman, he's got to try to oar the boat and keep it in position to where you don't get too much line out, too much slack, and they can come off. And so keep right on that fish. Sometimes you're pushing at them, sometimes you're rowing back, sometimes you're rowing back out of the way. And then the final go is the fisherman gets ready and then lifts his rod tip and tries to surf up that fish. But those big ones, they don't give up and surf in. Like, they're fighting the whole time. You just kind of feel he's ready, and you go, okay, here it comes, and strip, pull up on him, pull up, and then guy with the oars slides him over his seat, grabs the net, and then goes for the scoop. But it's just an absolute riot, like with your heart beating the whole time, and it's just laughing the whole time, and then so fun to spend that much quality time with a good buddy that's so sick for it, like I am or whatever. And Dylan's just the perfect partner. So good on the sticks, so good with the rod, so skilled, So we just had a riot. We caught 8A. So we got lucky on that deal and on one of my favorite rivers. And that river, when it runs high, it runs tea-colored too. Which is so insane. So, yeah, it was an amazing trip to catch that salmon fly hatch and then into these couple summits. And I've actually got some really good fishing too this spring. I got out with my dad a bunch, which I always really enjoy. My dad loves to fly fish, and so I did a bunch of trips with him and fished a bunch of different rivers. A lot of times, like, you get stuck in a rut, and we live on this Madison, and the Madison is so good. It's like such a crown jewel of a river to fish, but it's tough. You get stuck in this rut of constantly going there, and which is fun. You get to know these sections and things, but I just have so many rivers that are close to my house that are really good fishing. So I got Dad on a lot of those systems this year. Really got him throwing a lot of streamers. And we caught one 8A as well. We caught a couple 8As for sure throwing streamers, but we caught one where we did the big hole, and then we floats down into the Jefferson and floated the Jefferson and just caught that magical day where they were eating streamers. And I kept my dad in the front for a lot of it. It was every place he put that thing, there was trout trying to eat it, and he was getting strikes, and he caught a bunch of them. And then I caught a really good one, a really nice fish that was like a good solid 22, 23. And I had one on that was bigger that I lost, that I fought for a long time. Again, those rodeos going down the river, hooked up with Dad. But just really fun to share that with Dad, as I know, he loves it. But so I did get a bunch of spring days with Dad, and plan to again next year. And really, I just love that springtime fishing. The fall, I'm so busy with hunting, and I'm going to do better at getting some days out in the fall to chase some good fish around. I love the wintertime. Wintertime, I fish a bunch. Anytime it's above freezing, sometimes when it's below freezing. Love the steelhead trips and things of that nature. And I also love the salt. I love doing that, fishing the flats out there. God, is that fun? And I've been to the Keys a couple times and thrown after those fish, but it's like a combination between hunting and fishing, where you don't do any blind casting. It's all just hold on your fly and look for these fish out in the water, look for tailing bones, and then you got to be really good at the double haul. And it's a big double haul. You got to double haul down to your knees and throw it against wind, and it's super technical. You usually get one shot on these fish to get it, 3 feet beyond them, couple feet in front of them. So when you strip your fly back, you strip it by their face. And then it's real tough to get the hang of the strip set, because I'm a trout fisherman and I love to set up high, but that strip set is just absolutely critical. But there's all this different water to peer into. You're peering in, first of all, you're in the tropics, which is amazing in itself. It's nice and warm, and then there's all these different water types. Sometimes you're looking through seagrass, sometimes it's white sand beaches, sometimes it's tailing bones, sometimes it's tarpon out there that are rolling after bait fish. It's just an amazing way to fish, but it's also fairly expensive to rent a boat or to hire a guide to go do it, which I've done before. But I am planning a trip with my family. We're going to go to the Bahamas in December and take my girls, take my wife. We've got a VRBO, and going to go walk these beaches and throw to bones. And so, no guides. I'll be able to fish the tides and fish the mornings and then hang out with the family through the day. So it's like the perfect combo trip for me that I can get really excited about. And then the girls are super excited. They've got beaches to lay on. And also, I'll get my daughters out with me doing some fishing as well. So super excited to make it back to the salt. But anyways, love to fish the winter months, and springtime is my real season where I have a bunch of time where I can go a bunch. And then into early summer, usually I've got more time for the Salmon Fly Hatch. I did get out one day on the Madison with my girls. We threw some salmon flies and got some meat, so that was pretty fun. But really missed the big show on the Madison. I'm so far, anyways. But I have had really good fishing up country. So much of the salmon fly fishing is done out of a boat. Not that you can't do it wade fishing. You just cover so much water and highly effective. But as these hatches start moving up, there is a chance, like the Madison's a great river to bank fish salmon flies with. So this is a really cool tactic that I'll use in the summertime is I'll have a salmon fly on, and salmon fly eats, like they either decide they're going to eat or they don't. It's not a spot where you sit in a run and you fish it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Sometimes you can kind of find a back slough, but it's pretty much one good drift, and that fish either eats it or doesn't. So what I do is I go totally lightweight, and then I walk the bank lines of the river. And, I'll go walk 3-4 miles of bank line and then 3-4 miles back of bank line. So you're talking, 6 to 8 miles a night. I'll go walk of this bank line, and it's fairly open. There's not a lot of brush on the river, or you kind of walk around where the brush is, get a few casts, and then around. But for the most part, you can just walk down these open bank lines, throw a salmon fly cast, and you kind of like throw a cast, next to the bank line and bring that in, and then one out in the seam. And so you'll get 2-3 shots every place you're standing, but I almost just keep walking and keep throwing this thing. I just keep walking, keep throwing until these fish eat it. And I've actually had like some of my best salmon fly fishing doing this. And so last year I got it really good, like up around $3 bridge. Caught my best salmon fly brown last year up there using this tactic. So I believe the hatch is getting up there now, and two of the biggest fish that I've ever caught were caught this way, like up between the lakes, like between Quake and Hebken. There's some really good fish in there. And up there, that salmon fly hatch will get up there and doing that same bank line walk and throwing. There was this one run, and I had crossed the river, which it's a pretty sketchy cross, and had got across it, and so I was the only one on the other side, and fished down into this deep hole, and I threw my bug out there, and man, I saw this flash of this fish that was so big that tried to eat it and miss my bug. And so a lot of times if you miss one on the salmon fly hatch, and this goes for a boat, for wade fishing, whatever it is, I'll just sit on the bank line and I'll give that fish 5-10 minutes to forget about it. Like, I don't cast right back out to him because it's rare you'll get that fish to come right back up after your fly the next cast. And we get to test this in a boat where we miss a fish and we throw right back up. And, sometimes you'll get lucky and he'll eat it again, but a lot of times he won't. So that's exactly what I did. I had this giant fish that tried to eat it, didn't get it, and so I sat there on the bank line and I gave it 10 minutes. And then the very next cast, I rolled it off this cut bank, and it kind of rolls into this deep seam right there. And the biggest brown trout I've ever seen came up and ate that thing right in front of me. Set the hook, and the fight was on. I mean, it was like fighting a salmon out there. And landed him. I measured him on my rod, so it was like a 28-inch brown trout, probably a 10-pound fish, 8-pound fish, something like that, just this crazy colored up brown. And to be honest with you, like, I never kill a trout, never kill a steelhead or anything, and not that you can't keep fish and eat them. I come from like the Washington boys that, like my grandpa has he can't turn fish back. He will here in Montana, but he wants to kill every fish he catches, but we just get trained like in these Montana rivers that this resource, that if everybody was to keep a fish in the river, we wouldn't have any fish left. And I love the sport of it. So, sure, if it's a nice salmon or if it's a fish you like to eat, like I don't blame you, but I just don't keep any. I sat on the bank with this river, or with this brown, like right on the edge of the river, holding them like, gosh, should I get this thing mounted? And I just decided not to, and that I wanted to keep them in the system and keep them in the river, and that I didn't feel right about killing them and taking them out of the system. So I turned them right back, right into that hole. Biggest fish I've landed. It was on a Salmon Fly Hatch, 28-inch brown, colored up, beautiful fish. Had this sketchy river crossing. Had no camera, no phone, but I have that moment that I'll always remember. You know, I've got it and can play it back in my head. And the silly part of this story is that I let that fish back, and a lot of times once I catch a big fish, I'll just sit there and just bask in the moment. I mean, this is the biggest brown trout I've ever caught. I just sit there and it's like, man, that just made my day. And I had other eats that day. It was really off the hook fishing. And that's usually when you get those big fish to eat, is when there's salmon flies all over, fish are eating them, they're keyed into them. You usually don't fool a fish like that throwing salmon flies when they're not all over the water. Those fish only eat during certain times. And I just sat there and basked in my moment. Just caught the trout of a lifetime. And, but I might as well throw back in there off that same little run, cut bank into that deep pool in that river bank, and I throw back out there, and I'm not kidding you guys, I hooked a giant rainbow the next cast. I actually think that was the first fish that I saw eat because I had seen a red flash. Now, this fish was just full of fire. I mean, it was an absolute rodeo down the river bank. I finally landed him 100 yards downstream or somewhere down in there after a good, 5-10 minute battle with this fish. He just had so much power. I didn't have control of this fish. He had control of me. And I landed this fish, and it was a 25.5-inch rainbow on the very next cast. I mean, two of the largest fish I've ever caught, and they were right in a row, bang, bang, it's just crazy. But that's what this hatch can do. This hatch can produce magic. That's why I love to fish it. So that's why I want to do like a 20-day tour next year, and not book too much construction work, or book my time off and keep the guys busy, and then go chase this thing around. I mean, we only live once, and life goes pretty quick, and I only have so many salmon fly hatches left in my future. Hopefully many more. But man, it's just crazy good fishing. But there's other great fishing throughout the summer. So there's a bunch of great hatches that go on. And I like getting in on these things too. So the Caddis Hatches in the evening. Oh, and that's another thing. With any of these hatches, during the summer, we get a lot of pressure on these rivers. So first thing in the morning is a great time to go float and to get these eats. And a lot of times there's not a lot of bug life, but the fish remember them from the night before, and you're the first guy down with the bugs. So that's a really good strategy. The strategy that I like is the evening drifts. Guide boats usually get off by about 5 o'clock at night, sometimes as late as 6. So I like to put on at 5 or 6, and I like to float till dark. And being in the northern hemisphere here in Montana, we get a ton of light. It'll stay light till 9:30, 10. But that is where you get the river to yourself, or at least a lot fewer boats, a lot fewer wade fishermen. They usually go home for dinner by about that time. They're done for the day. And so I really try to plan it out where I can get my work days in and then get fishing in the evening. So it's one of my major tactics in the summertime is to just fish in the evening. So get stuff done in the middle of the day and just save that window of time in the evening. And so they love to eat salmon flies in the evening. That's usually when I do my best. But there's also these amazing hatches that come off. Some of our Caddis hatches will get these huge, elk hair caddis, it's a white wing caddis. I call it elk hair. That's the actual fly we use, but kind of a light green body and white wings. Sometimes they can be a little darker wings, but these things get giant. We'll get size 12 or even size 10 caddis, and these fish will really key into these things. And a lot of times when you're dry fly hatching these smaller hatches, it's not like the salmon fly where I throw one drift and then move on. I mean, you can do that as well, cover a lot of water, but I'll almost get in a good hole, like a big flat where a lot of fish are living, and then throw these caddis and catch fish. And there's just like I get to nymph in the wintertime and in the spring, and I throw a lot of streamers, and I love throwing streamers in the summertime too. It's hunts for big fish, but it's like summertime's meant for dry flies. Like there is no more exciting way to watch a fish eat than to watch them come up on the surface and grab your fly. So that's really what I try to target. But also seeing like little yellow sallies, which is a form of stone. It's like a stone fly that comes out. It's yellow, and then the males have a red bud on them. Been seeing those around quite a bit, along with these salmon flies. Like a lot of times people chase this salmon fly hatch, but after the salmon fly, there's a lot of golden stones that come off. So the golden stones are maybe just a touch smaller than a salmon fly. They're like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, so still a great big giant bug, and they're yellow in color. And so a lot of these stoneflies, they'll hunt for big fish, and you can fish below the hatch, so you're out of the crowds, and then you're fishing these yellow stoneflies. And then as it gets later into the season, I'll be fishing hoppers. I love to fish hoppers. I go down a lot of the Madison too. I'm fishing the weight only areas. So, you can take a boat down these areas, but you can't fish from a boat. So that would be like Town Bridge to the lake, and then you have to row out the lake. So I like fishing that. I like fishing like up around $3 bunch of trout up there, and it's wade fishing only all the way down to Lions Bridge. So there's a good chance to fish these sections, and they don't quite get hit as hard, as it's tougher to guide somebody wade fishing than it is boat fishing. But I'll still fish the good sections as well, throwing hoppers and just do my evening drifts like I like to do. But hoppers are another one of those hatches that are just insane. Also mix in some lake fishing, really trying to work on my lake fishing. Got into a good one the other day, this glacial fed lake, and was able to catch a few out of there. And there's some big ones in there too. So I like trail running in there with my rod in my hand, and then just some bugs in my pocket and some tippet, and go in there. So I'm going to get in there again here shortly. And then that Western Hunting Summit, they had a lake in there. They also had a river. What is that river called? It's a great river, great brown trout fishery. And then it runs through a wheelsaw, dumps into the Yellowstone there. It's not the Boulder. It's the anyways, it's right past Livingston there. But there's not a lot of access on it, so it can be a little tough. I think you can take. Well, I don't know. I looked at taking like a single-man boat down it the other day. There's a lot of log jams in places in that thing. But it's a pretty good fishery. I was up higher on it and able to fish for some cutthroat up there, which was fun. Nobody around, nobody fishing. And then there was a lake up there that was full of brook trout. So they were, I don't know. It was fun. They were brook trout, but it was a lake. It almost felt like they were. You know how you get in those places where it almost feels like they're planted or like it's staged or something. It kind of felt like that to me. So like I was into it. It was fun. They'd eat some hoppers and eat dry flies, and they were brook trout, but they were almost like too hungry for the system. Like it was like this kind of almost feels like cheating or too easy. I don't know if I like this. It's like one of those deals. But it was fun. Beautiful colored up brook trout, and they were eating dry flies, so I did get a chance to do that a bit too. So I am fishing here and there, and I am going to get out in the evenings and chase this hatch a little bit more. But yeah, it's super fun. It's summertime, and summertime's the time for dry flies. Time to come up and watch them eat. And there's so many great systems, in Montana and in these western states. But there's also these high country lakes. Smaller systems that don't get hit by guides, so that like there's a lot of opportunity. Like that Upper Ruby is a pretty fun system to fish with hoppers and catch a pile of fish up there. And sure, I'm not chasing after that giant brown trout a lot of times on these smaller systems, but that action is pretty fun, and the serenity of like having it to yourself is pretty fun as well. So yeah, we're into summertime, and some great dry fly action out there, some great fishing. So man, I mean, we only live once. If you're thinking about that river you want to get to, like take an adventure out there, go camp for a few days and go throw some dry flies, or go throw some flies, whatever you're into. And even nymphs this time of year can be highly successful. They'll eat those all day long, choosing the right nymphs that correspond to these hatches that are coming off. So like, I really feel like fly fishing is tapping into the ecosystem, and that's like how you do better than spin fishermen, because you've got you're tapped into the ecosystem of what these fish are really eating. And so even with nymphs, I'm trying to get the right bugs that represent the hatches that are coming off. So if it's salmon flies or big stone flies, you're using big rubber legs, and I always like rubber legs in systems that have salmon flies, as they just hunt for big fish. And then caddis, like serendipity, is a great pattern over here. And serendipity, funny story like about that fly. Well, the word serendipity means on accident, like it turned out good, and that's the deal with this fly. Is it put deer hair on the top of it as an accident, and then all these fish were eating it for caddis, and I actually find that they'll eat it for midge as well. But that's a great fly, like in a green color out here. For smaller stone flies, like pheasant tails always work. Prince is a great attractor. They always like to eat a San Juan worm. They'll eat that all the time. And then just trout candy, like smaller little nymphs that represent midge and small mayflies. And you kind of build your system of flies that you like to fish. Even leeches is a big meal for flies, and that's what I was getting them on. Some of those brook trout would eat hoppers, and then if they weren't coming up, I would get them off a little leech pattern. I actually got it from a really well-known guide in Montana that stopped fishing the rivers and started fishing the lakes more. So he fishes like Hepkin Lake a lot. My buddy Charlie also fishes Hepkin Lake. And lakes are just different, trying to find the land features and the weed beds where these fish live. But these guys are pretty good at figuring it out. But anyways, this old-time guide gave me a couple flies. And one's like with some orange chenille on it. And then it's got a red tail. And it's like a leech pattern, and it's got a little bead head on it. And so he gave me a couple different patterns and said, try these out in lakes. And so I copied the patterns and then can tie them myself. And then so I have a handful of them. And he was spot on. The thing just catches fish. I don't know what it represents. I think like smaller trout, and it's got some good flash to it. And maybe like those brook trout have some red colors. And also, like, I've done really good on cutthroat on them too. I don't know if it's the red color on it or if it's just an attractor pattern, but I'll use those in lakes. As far as leeches in the rivers, I like using like a dark one with some red on it or some maroon in it. They seem to really like that pattern for me, like a small beadhead one, size 12 or so. But yeah, there's a bunch of different flies out there, and these fly shops will help you picking out good bugs as well that work. But it's just super fun. It's summertime, warm weather. Go wet wading. Don't got to put my waders on anymore. Just shorts and my wading or quick dry pants, and then my wading shoes and sun hoodie, and I'm just good to go fishing for the day. So super fun. But I thought I'd jump on real quick and do some quick summertime fishing stories and things of that nature and chasing the hatch. So hope you guys are getting out and getting some good fly fishing in. I sure appreciate the support of the podcast, social media, and everything. So thanks, you guys, and good fishing to you.